Welcome to today's web conference, U.S. Azure Partner Community Call for November, presented by your first presenter, Jonathan Gardner, National PTS for Microsoft. Jonathan, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the call today, the Azure Partner Community Call. We've had a lot going on, and we're going to have a good call today. So here's our agenda. We're kind of going through the welcome phase now, but we're going to cover what's been going on since our last call, some of the really interesting stuff that's come out, and then we're going to dive into some of the meat of the session and really why you're here for the Azure Site Recovery stuff. So if at any point in time you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the window. We'll try and get those answers as best we can. Like I said, we've had a lot going on since our last call. These are just a few of the highlights. This certainly doesn't round out the entire list, but some of the interesting things that have happened is changes to the Azure Marketplace. We've certainly seen that update to expand and include lots of different offerings and images. You'll see more partner offerings being added so that you can deploy those right from the Marketplace directly to the Azure platform. Certainly opens up a lot of opportunities for custom images to be deployed and greater expansion into the open source community. So if that's something that you're leveraging or you'd like to use with your own images, certainly please check that out and some of those updates. VM sizes, we've seen the release of the new massive G series VM images that really change the way that we can handle workloads in the Azure platform, really reducing all those barriers to high I/O workloads and significant processing power necessary. So really look to check that out if you're using those and taking advantage of those workloads. Azure Site Recovery is why we're all here today to talk with that team, but some really cool new features with the ability to do SAN replication and some of the orchestrated disaster recovery scenarios. Docker is certainly an interesting expansion on our open source commitment. We've seen significant growth in the Docker platform in the Linux stack, but we've made some announcements recently that this is coming to Windows and that we've had expanded capabilities in the Azure platform as well, so that now you have private Docker registries can be deployed through Azure. So a lot of collaboration there, and then I think even in the last couple of days we can actually manage those Docker packages from the Windows client. So a lot of expansion and commitment to the open source through the Docker announcements, and then finally with data platforms, and certainly data platforms is much bigger than one block on this presentation, but we wanted to lump those together. We've seen some the announcements around batch processing, changes to the HD Insight, stream analytics, lots of new stuff coming out from a data platforms perspective that can really be taken advantage of. We've certainly we've tried to put out a lot of content from the National PTS team, including blog posts around the end of life for Server 2003 and migrating VMs to the Azure platform. Nick Johnson on our team has also put out a video that is covering how to maximize your Azure credits that you get as part of your MSDN subscription. So I really advise you guys to take a look at those. You can find those on the blog, or you can find them in the Yammer group, so links there. Lots of opportunity for partners with the end of life coming very, very quickly upon us for Server 2003. Love to get those workloads moved up to Azure. Certainly a great opportunity to have that discussion with your clients. And the tools that we're going to talk about today make migrating to Azure even easier for all those workloads. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Dan Sipe and Chad Stanfield for the actual meat of the presentation on Azure Site Recovery today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. going to go ahead and grab that presentation for us. So today we're going to talk about the Azure Site Recovery and kind of what exactly that is, the technology, where it was born from, why Microsoft acquired it, and where it's going to fit going forward in the Microsoft and specifically the Azure portfolio. So the Azure Site Recovery solution had come from a company by the name of InMaj Systems. InMaj Systems has been around for several years, over 10 years, has several patents and patents pending on the technology of replication and of creating application consistency points and really doing the things that are needed to move data from point A to point B, especially into Azure, while still providing an optimization on the WAN connection and still giving you optimization on any applications that might be running there. The solution is deployed with many different users out in the wild, as far as customers, large industry, as well as down into the SMB area. The Fortune 50 is kind of the core product that we're looking at there. For the major customers that you can see. We also have partners in the industry that are using this technology as an OEM partner. And so it is branded as their own technology. It's supported in their own organization, but it is the actual same technology that we're going to be talking about today that they're offering as well. So it's a very broad and well-used solution set, and that's one of the reasons why Microsoft we partnered and were acquired by Microsoft is for that the capabilities of the product and what it brings to the Azure market specifically. And what those capabilities are is essentially disaster recovery first and foremost. What we're doing with Azure is being able to provide a location for your customers to be able to replicate their data into that environment and to allow it to scale and to grow and to burst as needed in that event that they've got a single server failure or they have a full site failure and they need to bring things online. We can certainly scale that from a single server, or we have full orchestration built into the solution that can bring servers online in an appropriate order and the appropriate operation. So we also do the migration into Azure. There's many solutions where organizations are looking to reduce their infrastructure footprint, and Azure is a fantastic place to do that. So we give them the solution that helps them do real-time migrations into Azure. So you're no longer having to plan and manipulate long outage windows where you're bulk moving data up into the Azure cloud, and then eventually you'll be able to flip it over. What it allows you to do is do real-time replication while production data on site still working, and then when it's time to fail over after that replication is fully copied into the Azure cloud, it's simply a matter of working through a wizard and bringing that data online, and then certainly redirecting the traffic towards the Azure location at that point. Regardless of the solution, whether it's local disaster recovery into Azure, whether it's a hosted offering for DRaaS, or whether it's just helping people migrate into the Azure cloud, it's going to use the same technology, the same underlying functionality is there and available for us. When you're talking about replicating data, specifically with disaster recovery, you have to address this concept of RPO and RTO, that recovery point and that recovery time objective, or saying, when there is an issue, how much data is going to be lost, and then how quickly am I going to be able to bring that data back online. As you know, today there's many options for handling this RPO, that recovery point objective, or to minimize that data loss. Where ASR sits is in what's called the CDP segment, or the Continuous Data Protection segment. What that means is that it's constantly monitoring the changes as they occur at the millisecond level, and it's replicating those changes as quickly as it can into the target environment. So based upon change rate and bandwidth speed that are available, you'll be able to keep that recovery point objective near zero, as close to zero as possible. On the other side of the equation is the RTO, or that recovery time objective. You've had that outage, and now the question is, how quickly can I get back into production? I want to bring this back online. I want my customers and my employees to be able to access the data and be effective and productive once again. We also address that recovery time side of the equation using that CDP, or that continuous data protection. Because we're not based on snapshots and we're not based on gold copies and stitching information together, that time to recover is very quick. We actually have the data up to the millisecond, and you're simply rolling back to a point in time prior to that disaster. And so you can say, show me what my data looked like 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago. And so you can really minimize the downtime for that data loss, because you're not starting from when you initiated the replication and protection. You're starting from right now and simply undoing the changes that caused that disaster and bringing that online. Some other superior technology that we have is what we call sparse retention. So when you're talking about CDP, or continuous data protection, and you're monitoring every millisecond of data change as as the days go on across multiple servers, we give you the ability to control what that storage management, what that historical recovery capability looks like. So with a technology we call sparse retention, you can actually define and retain fewer application recovery points as that data gets older. An example of that might be, perhaps you need every millisecond of capability. You want to recover to any millisecond of time for maybe the first day or the first 24 or even 48 hours. And then after that, you don't need such granularity. It's okay to have maybe every half an hour or every hour of recovery. And then maybe you do that for a week or so, and then, a daily recovery point, and then perhaps a monthly recovery point as time goes on. You have full control over what that looks like on a per server basis. So each server may have a different requirement for the level of granularity that you need to recover to. And so you can control that on a per server basis. This helps you improve your storage management to ensure that you're only using the amount of storage that's required based on your retention period. And it also helps to reduce the time to recover for older data. If you could imagine for a moment that you needed to go through a failover exercise and you needed to roll back 10 months. If you had to undo every millisecond of change for 10 months, while it's certainly possible, it does take a little bit of time to actually work through that process before it can come online. By implementing the sparse retention and sparsing that out as we get older, those point in times that it can recover to come up much quicker, because it doesn't have to read through every millisecond of change. It simply goes to those known point in times that you've archived, and they can bring that data online. Again, it's really keeping track of that recovery time objective as well as that recovery point objective. From an optimization standpoint, that recovery point objective, we're actually doing a block level replication. We're only replicating the change information on those blocks. We're not even sending full blocks. So it's a very lightweight, non-obtrusive replication solution when it's in that differential replication state. It's keeping track of just the block changes and sending those up immediately, and then certainly keeping a history of what those changes are in the event that you need to undo them. There's no deduplication or any additional overhead onto your data. So when it comes to that recovery time objective, you do not need to rehydrate that data. Your data is in a working state up in the Azure cloud or at the target location, and it's ready to be used at the moment that you need it. So you're no longer going to have to factor in rehydration of that data, to bring that online. We're keeping that recovery point objective very low. As I mentioned earlier, we work with many different applications, not just the server side and the operating system, but we will recognize any applications that are installed on that machine, whether it be, SQL or Exchange or SharePoint or Oracle, or many of the applications that you'll see across all industry. And we'll be able to work with those applications, providing a quiesced point in time. So in addition to the CDP, or that continuous data protection, we're going to recognize that application, and we're going to work with it and create a guaranteed recovery state, where essentially we're going to take any pending writes that might be in memory for that application, and we're going to have those flushed down to disk. And what happens there is we're monitoring the block changes as they occur, and when we execute that quiesced state, we'll take any of those pending changes in memory, push them down to disk, and we're going to insert a flag or a marker immediately after that last block of change. And we're going to send all that information over. Ultimately, what that means to you is when you go to recover, you have an option to select any millisecond in time, and you can literally type in a point in time down to the millisecond, and you can bring that data online. In addition to that, with application servers, you have the option to choose a guaranteed consistent state, meaning that when you select one of those guaranteed points in time, you know that there's going to be no loss of transactions that have gone on there. You've got that quiesced state of that application, and you can bring that online. It's all about choices and giving you guys and your customers the tools to recover the best way possible given the situation that they had. Another thing that we have is a vSnap. Think of it as a virtual snapshot. Virtual because it does not use any additional data. You can present the replicated data at any point in time, and you can do that non-destructively. We're actually going to go through that today, where we do a simple example of presenting a volume for the purposes of recovering some data that may have been deleted. So you can very quickly bring that online, does not interfere with your protection or your ability to fail over at a later time. You simply virtually bring up a representation of that volume. You can navigate that volume as though it were just a standard volume that's connected to Windows, and you can extract and use any data that is out there. So really we come down to Azure Site Recovery is one solution for multiple infrastructures. We know there's a lot of stuff out there in the environments, whether it be physical, virtual, whether they're going cloud or some type of hybrid in between those. And the product has really been designed to work with and to integrate with any combination that you might have between those environments and platforms. It even offers site-to-site protection of your physical assets. And so we understand that there are solutions out there that may not fit into Azure today, and that those solutions still need to be protected. And so we do offer a wide range of Windows and Linux operating systems that can be supported not only into Azure, but it could be supported to a secondary location, perhaps a secondary office or a secondary data center that your customers own there. We do have hypervisor integration, including Hyper-V as well as VMware. So we understand the hypervisor logic. We understand how to protect entire guest machines within a hypervisor to simplify that process. We unify the interface between both physical and virtual assets. It's one interface that controls everything, regardless of how that's going, how you're protecting that data or what kind of asset that's on. I mentioned this earlier, but we have that automated orchestration so that if you're recovering multiple servers, you can group those together into server groups, and you'll have the ability to bring those online in the proper order. A great example is a SharePoint farm, where you've got some database in there, you've got some app tier in there, you probably have some web tier in there. You can bring those on in the proper order and bring those up. Certainly reliance upon Active Directory that needs to be accounted for, and so you can add that into the mix as well. Overall, it's simplifying the use of the product, especially when it comes time to bringing it online and reducing that recovery time objective. And then certainly hybrid cloud. We're seeing a lot of that as people are embracing the new technology of the cloud and starting to move that data into there. We do that seamless replication, so we can protect those assets into the Azure cloud. We can get it up in there for you so they can scale out on an as-needed basis there. So to kind of sum up our technology, what we're looking at is it's a block level, asynchronous, continuous data protection. It gives application consistency, and it is server and storage agnostic. So it's really designed to just lay on top of the infrastructure that's been built out today and be able to replicate whatever's in that infrastructure, whether it's an entire server that's been virtualized, whether it's just a specific volume on a physical server, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be asynchronous. You don't have to worry about distance limitations, especially when Azure. You don't need to worry about which site that you're selecting because that asynchronous replication will get it there. From an architecture standpoint, we're two-tier. Think of it as a host offload architecture. We're going to go into some architectural designs here where that'll become very clear. But the idea behind it is to ensure that we have a very low or a very small footprint on your production environment on those machines that are being protected. The last thing we want to do is add overhead to a production server just so that you can have replication and protection capabilities for it. So by having that two-tier, that host offload architecture, it gives us the best of both worlds. The ability to integrate at the application level and work very closely with that server. And it also gives us the ability to remove any heavy lifting, any logic for that replication, whether it be caching, queuing, encryption, compression, bandwidth management. All of that is removed from your production servers onto that second tier. We're network-based. We just sit on top of the TCP/IP infrastructure that's in place today. We understand NATs. We understand VLAN segments. We understand all of that. So it's very easy to just kind of lay us in there. The WAN optimization is built right into that product on that second tier that we were talking about. There's no need to add any additional optimizers that are in the environment. The product will take care of that itself. And then encryption, we do encryption on the wire. So while that data is in transit between the source and the target, it will be encrypted there while it's in flight. So there's a couple of tools we have for Azure Site Recovery, where we can orchestrate, the disaster recovery to a secondary site. Primarily, if we're sitting in a Hyper-V environment, we've got System Center running in there, Hyper-V 2012, R2, the latest and greatest is in there. We can actually establish a replication channel to a mirror system. You have a Hyper-V 2012 R2 system sitting up there, and you can establish that, directly site to site, whether it's on-prem. Also, you can take that same logic and you can bring it up into the Azure cloud. And so you can see we're really embracing wanting to provide a protection solution for you, whether it means having to go on-prem initially, or some of the systems need to stay on-prem, or whether you're going to take advantages of what Azure brings to the market. And so you'll be able to mix and match and choose between those solutions of what's the most appropriate given the task that you're trying to accomplish with protection. Additionally is when we get outside of kind of the Microsoft family and we've got, say, some VMware in there, or we've got some physical assets in there. And how do we want to protect those? Again, we're going to provide you with that ability to protect not only those virtual guest machines. You can select and choose whichever ones you want, and those physical machines. You can do an on-site replication, or you can also replicate them into Azure. So whether it's data replication or data for migration. So you can see, regardless of the platform, there's the solution there for integration and replication and protection of those assets. The migration into Azure is actually going to be coming in early 2015. So that migration is right around the corner that's there. Now let's talk about what this would look like in kind of a more sample, site-to-site replication. You've got a primary site, you've got a handful of equipment out in that primary site, and you essentially are going to deploy the components that allow for replication. The first component that we deploy would be on-site, and it's called the process server. This is that second tier of that architecture we were talking about. The process server does all the heavy lifting, the caching, queuing, compression, encryption, the bandwidth management, all the reporting capabilities are there. At the DR site, you would have what we call a configuration server. The configuration server is actually where the user interface resides, where you manage the entire environment that's there. And so you can control anything that's going on regardless of what location it's at. We will then deploy what we call a mobility service. We'll deploy a piece of code on each of those servers that will passively monitor the write I/O as it occurs. So it's going to track and monitor that write I/O, and it's going to immediately hand it off to that process server to where it does all the heavy lifting. So that mobility services agent is going to work with the applications to create consistency points. In a Microsoft world, it's using VSS, that volume shadow copy services, to create those consistent states, and then, like we had spoken about earlier, just simply inserts that flag or that marker in that replication stream so we know when there's a consistency state. At the target location, we'll have what we call a master target server. We establish a many-to-one logic where we replicate those machines at the metadata level, and we collect the information about them, whether they're physical or virtual, it doesn't matter, and then we can build that environment out for you on the secondary site. And so you have a whole bunch of the metadata of those machines. We call them ghost copies because they're there, but they're not actually being used. They're not powered on. They're not running right now. They're just sitting in wait at the metadata state. We also then deploy the appropriate amount of storage to that master target, and we establish a many-to-one replication into that master target. So you only have one asset that's running, whether this be up in the cloud in Azure or whether it be at a secondary site. It's collecting that information as you replicate into it. In the event that you do have an outage, whether it's one or multiple servers, you essentially will select the machine that you want to bring online. It's just a user interface, a wizard that just walks you right through these steps of selecting that machine. You define what point in time that you want to recover to. So you can say, go back to my last known good millisecond, go back to my last known good consistency point, or you can pick arbitrarily any point in time historically or any consistency point historically. The master target will identify the appropriate storage, and it'll roll it back to the point in time that you've selected. At that point, it'll detach that storage from the master target, and it'll attach it to the appropriate guest machines, and it'll power those machines online. And so you'll be up and running and ready to go. Whether this is from one site or multiple sites, it doesn't matter. It's a many-to-one solution set that can be set up here. And then this same seamless functionality will be coming to Azure in early 2015. So it's right around the corner to have this same capabilities in the Azure infrastructure. So I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop right now, and we're going to go into a quick little demo. First thing that we'll do is go into the dashboard of the UI so that we can see what that UI looks like. Give that just a minute to refresh for everybody. Okay. Hopefully that UI has been refreshed and everybody can see that. Once you authenticate into the web UI, it's a very simple screen that you see is a high-level dashboard. What we're going to see is we're going to see a list of servers in the upper left-hand corner. There's only one in this particular lab right now. You would have multiple servers. They'd be listed out right there. You also have a plans tab where you can group those servers by plan. Remember that we can do that whether it's within the same server set or whether it's multiple servers working on an application. You can group those together, and when they're grouped together, you can actually fail them over together as a server set, or you can fail them over individually or recover them individually. When I select one of these servers, the right hand of the interface refreshes and gives us all the information about what's going on. It tells us information about the source server. It tells us which process server we're going through in case we have more than one or multiple sites. And then it tells us which target server we're going to, or that master target, again, in case there's more than one or you've got things separated out. So it's very clear to see what's going on from a replication path and pair perspective. Also, you'll notice on the right-hand side there's these marching arrows going from the left to right with direction on them. That's showing you that replication is actually happening. I'm not sure if it presents well through the screen sharing, but those arrows are actually moving from left to right, showing you that there is data flow. The arrow also indicates which direction you're going because we have, regular protection and we have fail back or reverse protection capabilities. Obviously, those arrows would highlight and update appropriately based on how that protection scenario is. We provide you with a real-time RPO. So over here on the right-hand side, you can see that recovery point objective. That's real-time. You can see that we're under a minute behind. This is something that we're going to track on every server as well as every volume that's under protection. We provide you with the recovery window, whether it's in GMT. We also give you the ability to set a local time zone if that's appropriate. And then the number of consistency points that are available within that recovery window. And if we go down a little bit lower, we'll see which volumes are under protection. So on this particular server, it's very simply the S volume that is under protection. We have the RPO on that specific volume. So if I had a server with multiple volumes, I would be able to see what the RPO is on each of those volumes individually as well as on the server as a whole, and be able to keep track of all that information that's there. I'm going to jump into the source machine here, and we're going to create a little bit of a disaster. Very simply, you can see I go into the My Computer. We have the S drive, which we know is the drive that's under protection. We have a lot of data in here, whether it's very large, 9 gigabit files, or whether it's very simple stuff that's here. We're going to go ahead and just grab a handful of these, and we're just going to create a disaster by deleting them. I'll actually even empty the recycle bin so you know there's nothing up my sleeve here. So we've just created a disaster here. We've lost some files. Now we need to try to get those back. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our web user interface. We have a recovery tab here, and I'm going to create a recovery snapshot. Now, I don't want to fail over in this instance. I just want to recover a couple of files very easily and very quickly. So by creating that vsnap or that snapshot, it allows me to select which volume that data is on. Simply choose the server and the volume. It'll then, by default, ask me what time I want to recover to, and I can literally type it in down to the millisecond, and I can recover that data. Remember, we talked about those application consistency points. So I have application consistency points running here. And then once I select that, I can filter them out, or I can come to my list. If I simply select the top one, that's my last known good consistency point. And certainly it tells me what time that I'm recovering to. I'll just go ahead and grab that consistency point that's there. I'm then going to tell it I want to do a virtual snapshot, so I'll select the virtual option here. If I would like read-write capabilities against an application, if this was, for example, SQL data, and I wanted to run some queries against that SQL data, I would simply give it a temporary location of where those writes would be redirected so that I could have full read-write access to that virtual snapshot of that data. Finally, it just asks for which drive letter I want to present it as. So I'm going to take that S drive and I'll choose Z, just at the bottom, nice and easy. It's going to give me a summary page. It's telling me on the target machine here, we're taking the S drive on the target machine and creating it as a Z drive, and we're going to do a tag based at this point in time, and it's going to be a virtual presentation of this data. If that's indeed what I intended, I'm just going to select the finish option here. So once we're on this screen, it tells us what's going on, and then we have a progress here with a percentage. And we could certainly watch this percentage and have it count up. But while we're waiting, it'll take about 1.5 minutes. Let me connect to the target machine, and I just want to highlight a couple of things here. In that target machine, you'll notice that we've got just the system volume here. We have a retention volume, which is where all of the historical change information is being set. And then notice our S drive right here is actually offline. It appears offline because this is the target machine and we're replicating into the S volume. So we don't want any accidental usage of that data, any accidental corruption. So we simply just hide it from the UI. It's actually connected at the kernel level. It's receiving changes. It's even receiving differential changes now. So what's happening is it's going to take the S volume and say, I know what you look like right now. I'm going to read the retention data that's stored on the R volume, and I'm going to rewind you to a point in time, hopefully prior to that disaster, the point in time that we selected, and it's going to create the Z drive, and you can see that popped up right here. That Z drive is going to be an identical copy of the S drive at the time and date that we had selected to recover. And you can see as I go in there, you can certainly see that information. I can even open these simple files. These are just simple files here, but it would work for any type of file set. If this were SQL data, I could certainly just power on my SQL machine, import the databases and log files that might be here, and I can go ahead and run some queries on them. If we're talking about doing a quick recovery, I get to cheat a little bit. I'm in a lab, so I have a UNC mount point section already here. And it's really as easy as just grabbing the files that you want and dragging them back into the production site and just copying them back there. Okay. Because we're doing block level replication, all of the metadata about this file system stayed intact. So if you had ACLs or permissions, sharing, any of that type of stuff is still intact there. There's no need to go in and take over ownership or anything like that because we kept that metadata intact for us that's there. That's really as difficult as it gets to present that data and to use that data. It's the very same process if we were going to go through an actual failover. The only difference would be rather than presenting a Z drive, we would simply take this S drive, which is offline right now because we did non-destructive recovery, and we would just present the S drive at the point in time or the date and time that you had selected, and it would be up and running at that point. When you do a failover, it does break replication. Obviously, there's no more S drive for it to receive data from production. It just simply comes up and goes. We go back to the web user interface. You'll notice here we're at 100%. We're done with our activity. It's simply a matter of selecting the record and telling it to release the drive. We can do that operation as many times as we would like. And so if we wanted to present that every 10 minutes for the last hour, we could certainly present those up, and you could go through a different drive letter or a different mount point, and you can bring that data online. That process that we just went through, although it was highlighted on Windows machines, works in the Linux environment as well. And so it doesn't matter from a UI perspective. You're going to use the same screens and the same user interface, regardless of what that platform is. regardless of what's running on that platform. So SQL versus SharePoint versus even Oracle, it doesn't make any difference what's on there. So to kind of summarize everything, when we're talking about Azure Site Recovery and what is that value proposition, it comes down to heterogeneous replication. We're really committed to protecting the entire environment, whatever that might be. We want to make sure that you have a single point solution, a single interface to be able to use to protect your physical and your virtual environments, including even going P2V. You might have some physical assets that can be protected in a virtualized environment, regardless of what that underlying hardware is, what that storage looks like. We want to focus on that near zero RPO, that recovery point objective. We use that lightweight mobility services agent coupled with our two-tier architecture to ensure that you get the best possible replication solution across the application integration as well as bandwidth optimization. And that's where we get those multi-tier applications as well, where you've got applications that span multiple servers. Some of those servers may be physical and virtual mixed. You might have some clustering going on between physical and virtual nodes. It doesn't matter. We can protect clusters to clusters, clusters to standalone based on what what it requires. And then certainly that best-in-class RTO, that recovery time objective. When that disaster does strike, how quickly are you going to be back into production? By leveraging the CDP, that continuous data protection technology, and being able to simply just rewind the clock to a point in time that you want, you can quickly and easily and within minutes bring that data online. So Kim, it seems that I have run into a display problem. I'm not sure if that's being represented to everybody.
Do you want me to go back to the PowerPoint?
Nope, I'm actually wrapped up, so we can take it into questions now, but my screen just popped up and said we ran into a display problem, so I don't know how that reflected for everyone else.
I can see okay.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we'd like to start our Q&A session. As a reminder, please use the chat feature to enter your questions. Presenters will scroll through questions and answer as many as possible during the time that we have.
So there is one question up there that we'll go ahead and start it off. And the question was, in the scenario, what happens to users that are working on the S drive when the S drive is offline? It's a great question. So the S drive is only offline on the target, or where you're replicating that data to. And the reason we bring it offline is we don't want users working on that S drive. It's not an active-active solution for active-active replication. It's not trying to replace cluster type scenarios or geo-clustering type stuff. So that S drive is hidden specifically for that reason, to avoid any accidental usage or accidental corruption that's there. Certainly when you present it as any other drive letter, you can use it as you would like. And certainly on the production side, there's no interference whatsoever on any usage or any activity that's going on that S drive. It's a great question.
We do have additional time for questions. In the meantime, while you're thinking of your questions, I'll go ahead and put up a survey link. We've enabled the survey feedback for this web conference, and you can find the link in the chat feature. Please visit the link to enter your email address to access the survey, and we hope that you found today's information helpful. If you enjoyed today's web conference or have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, please let us know by completing our survey. The scores are on a scale from 5 to 1, with 5 being the highest possible score. Please take a moment to provide us with your feedback and be sure to click the submit button prior to exiting. And it looks like we do have another question.
Fantastic. So the question that came in is the queuing and compression and bandwidth and overhead. This is a very good question. And essentially what it comes down to is it's different for everybody. As you alluded into your question, it's a difficult thing to pinpoint without some specifics. So the specifics you're going to be looking for to kind of run into figuring this out is, how much data do you have that needs to be protected? How much change rate is going on that data? And then certainly what kind of bandwidth you have would dictate that RPO, that recovery point objective, or how quickly it can get to that target site. So as a percentage, it's hard to just nail in on a percentage because it's as much a science as it is an art based on everybody's environment. But the good WAG number that you can go with is kind of 10% overhead. We typically see somewhere between 8 and 15% change rate on average. Certainly there's some outliers there, higher and lower, but a good starting number is at 10%.
Hey Chad, this is Nick. I'm going to ask a question on the line here as well. For the partners that are here, if they want to begin sort of selling this and adding this to some of their current business practices and things like that, what's sort of the best way to get started if this is their first exposure?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the best way to get started is really we just need to get in contact with you so that the Azure Site Recovery team knows who they are. And then the steps that we go through is we'll certainly get you all signed up and take care of all that paperwork so that this SKU is added into any agreement that you may have. And then ultimately what we want to do is work with you in the environment and get you comfortable with the solution, allow you to set up a POC environment, allow you to give you the skills to do demos on your own. And we're very committed into supporting you through that process on the technical level to ensure that you feel very comfortable with the solution. It's a very easy solution to run. You get it installed and it's easy to go through that process, but we want to make sure you have the environment and you have that comfort level there so that you can be successful in sharing the capabilities that ASR brings to the table. So the question is ASR available to MSDN subscribers? That's actually a great question, and I don't know that I know the answer to that. However, MSDN subscribers do have access to an Azure subscription, and the code is available underneath your Azure subscription under the storage, under the protection storage section. If you go to the left-hand side down towards the bottom, you'll see your recovery storage icon there. You can select that. One of the options once you create that storage account is you can download the bits for the ASR solution. So I would say at that point it is available for the MSDN subscribers.
Great, thanks, Chad. Any other questions from the group? This is Nick Johnson, by the way, one of the other national PTSs. Otherwise, as we get close to closing out here, I just want to remind everybody there's a lot of ways to plug into the community, and all the links are shown on the screen here. I apologize. I know some of you had some trouble finding the link to actually join this meeting today. We'll get that corrected for next month. We'll make sure we post that on Yammer loud and clear so you can see it ahead of time, and we'll make sure that there's no issues there. So apologies. If you missed any part of this, we're going to post that recording later on here within the next day or two, and you'll be able to get access to the full presentation that way as well. So apologies. Thanks for your patience, and we'll get that worked out for you. Also, as a reminder, we are not going to have a community call in December, just due to the proximity to when people start taking extra time off towards the end of December for holidays and things. In January, we will have a call, and our topic is actually going to be networking on Azure. So that's a pretty big topic. We'll talk about how to connect your on-premise data center to the Azure cloud and some of the features, functionality, and tips and tricks around that. So be sure to tune in January. That's going to be a pretty hot topic, I think. So with that, if there's no other calls or questions from the floor, we'll go ahead and close out. Reminder to fill out your survey, and if you have any questions later on, feel free to post them on Yammer, and we'll be glad to interact there. Kim, anything else we need to do to close out?
Okay, great. Thank you, Nick. Ladies and gentlemen, all materials from today's presentation will be available on the WWE within 48 hours. And partners, you can access it on the WWAE as well. And I think if we don't have any other questions, I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters. And this concludes today's web conference. You may now